Hi, my name is Julia, and I have a story to tell about the power of the blood of the Lamb. I was raised in a Christian home, and it was in a Baptist church, as well as family members that were from down south in the holiness movement, Pentecostal. And so there were two different influences in my life as a Christian and my family. But when I was 4 or 5 years old, I went to vacation Bible school, and I still remember that picture on the wall that I'd drawn or colored in, a drawing of Jesus as a shepherd, and they taped the picture on the wall until the parents came and picked you up. And I remember waiting for my parents and looking at that picture that I had colored in. I knew Jesus was my shepherd, that he was my Lord. And there was a picture of even lambs or children in it. I remember that. But I remember he was my Lord, and that was at that age. But when I got older, around 12, I decided to get water baptized. I was water baptized in the church. But my home in the church that I was living in, or living and going to church, there's a lot of truth, a lot of amazing things about Jesus Christ. But the world was also in the church and in my home. We believed in Jesus Christ. It was the foundation, but there was a lot of stuff in the world, like entertainment, scary movies, horror movies, and things like that were still there. But my family had so much love for me and all of us kids that I gained so much confidence. I knew I was loved. I knew I was loved. But there was something that from the world that just started to creep in, the lies of the enemy, of how I'm supposed to be for the culture versus how I'm supposed to be for Jesus Christ. And I also wanted to share, I knew the difference between my father, earthly father, and who God was. I did have that separate, but I chose to have man and his opinion more than what I knew about the truth of God as I was growing up. So what wound up happening is, even though I had this confidence, the church, being there on Sundays or youth group on the weekends, what began to happen was the lie of the enemy that says to perform a certain way for people. And so I want to go back to when I was between 10 or 12. I remember my first time praying in the church in the basement on a metal chair on a Wednesday night prayer meeting, and we all sat there and had the prayer requests, and I remember writing it down even up into my teenage years in the back of the Bible, who to pray for salvation. But there's also this other experience in the body of Christ that I had on the other side of the family. I still remember them being with me on the north side of Chicago, by the way. They were from Warrior, Alabama. But they would be in the living room, my great-grandmother and her daughter, my grandmother, my father, my mother, and myself. I don't remember if any of my other siblings were there, but they were on their knees on the floor, bent over the couches. And I remember I was bent over on this cushion chair, this wing-back chair. And I was praying along with them, and they were wailing and crying and calling unto the Lord. And I just remember praying for a certain amount of minutes and praying for people, praying for things, and stopping, and then sitting back on my heels and seeing they're still going. And I'm like, well, maybe I can pray for something more. And I prayed again. And as a little girl, I kept trying to think of what else to pray for. And then finally I sat back on my heels, and I'm like, that's all I can pray for. I don't know what else to pray about. But I bring it up because there was a passion in the hearts of my relatives in the holiness movement. This is Pentecostal, they spoke in tongues, but I never heard them speak that way. But I knew that there was a passion. And from the church that I grew up, there was a foundation of the Word of God in the Baptist church. It was amazing. But there was the world in it. And in fact, I will say there was an elder on the church board that was part of the Masons. And my grandfather was a Mason. There were Masons in the family. But they also believed in Jesus Christ. So there was this mixture of the culture that was of the world. So when I went to college, I started to go astray. I remember I wanted to go to Bible college at first, but I thought, well, that you don't make that much money, so maybe I shouldn't go. But really, that was my heart, to just look and study Jesus. And on the north side of Chicago, there was a place for that, but I chose to just instead to go to college. I would meet, eventually I would meet this man. He thought I was special, and I thought he was very nice and special too, but I didn't realize I was being led astray. So I remember being seduced by this man, and I did share with him I didn't want my virginity taken. And I thought, oh my goodness. And he reminded me of what the man said afterwards. He said that he apologized. He said, I'm sorry for what he had done. And I remember being stunned that at that moment, my virginity was lost. I was keeping my virginity for God and for my husband. And it was gone in a moment. And I thought, in that moment, a lie from the enemy, a lie from the pit of hell, that I was second best to any Christian man because he could find a virgin instead that would be better than someone who had been tainted and that was used good. But there was this thing, there was this moment when my father asked me in college, are you a virgin? And I said, no. And he said, I wish you'd never told me. And I said, then why did you ask? I didn't tell him I was raped. I didn't tell him. Because I kept sleeping with that man. I thought to myself, my virginity was stolen, but the Lord corrected how to really phrase it. I was violated. And it was rape. Staying with that man who had raped me, I kept going with him. I kept staying with him because I thought I'm tainted. Maybe we'll get married one day to make things quote unquote right. But I will tell you, there did come a day where I found out I was pregnant. I had a conversation with this man. He wanted an abortion. I said no. But then in further conversation, and as I shared with him, I'm going to go ahead and have this child on my own. You don't have to raise a child with me. But then when he said, well, then I'll have to marry you. I just thought, have to marry me? And I remember thinking, if I keep the child and we get married, he'll have resentment that I had the child. He'll divorce me. And I had a fear of divorce, fear of someone not receiving the love that I have to give. That's really what it is. But anyway, when he said that, I said, well, maybe we will get the abortion. I remember thinking, no, I don't want it. So one day, days go by, and he parks on the north side of Chicago on Elston Avenue. And we get out of the car. I don't even know where we're going yet. And he starts pulling out a little sheet of paper from the classified ads in the newspaper. And I knew I had seen the classified ads before, and we had talked about abortion. I thought, I wonder. And then I thought, no, I know. We're going to an abortion clinic, even though he said, we're going to see a doctor. And I remember one foot after the other, I thought to myself, where are the protesters? Where are the protesters? I was looking for protesters, somebody else to get me out of the situation. I didn't think to run by myself. I thought, then he'll chase me. And then I thought, even if the protesters were mean, I'm like, I'll go to them. Where are they? I want them to take me home. And we kept walking in because I saw no protesters. And then I still remember visiting with the counselor, which is really not counseling at all, actually. But I knew she was just making sure that I was going to go through with it. I remember thinking maybe I could use her phone to call my parents. And I thought, even though they would have shame, they would get over it, even though there'd be shame. And I remember thinking, is there a place that will help me raise the children away from my family? Because I didn't want the shame, even though they'd get over it. But that shame piece was a really an evil tool from the enemy that deceived my family as well as myself. And I didn't call. And back then it wasn't cell phones. It was either call, they might answer, or they might not be home. But instead I did go through with the abortion. I do remember going through with it, and it all boiled down to fear of divorce, I thought, but I realized later it was really my desire for my love to be received from someone. But if it's not received, that's where I was at in my fear if it wasn't received. Going back to that moment before I walked out of that car to go with this man to get the abortion, there was a moment where my one leg was following after the other with his legs, walking one after another. And I do realize now there was a soul tie, even from that first moment of the rape and my continuing, there was a soul tie. Even in the Bible, it does say about being one even with a prostitute. And there would be one flesh. There is something spiritual that happens that was meant for just a husband and wife, but there it was with this man. And in Genesis also, a woman in Genesis 3, the Eve, who took that apple, one of the things that the Lord spoke to her was something like this, that her desire would be for her husband. And so in a way, I was acting out for my desire for this man that with the soul tie. I was kind of connecting with something that is unique, starting from Genesis chapter 3. So as I'm walking in, I know he's pleased, this man. And there was a part of me that thought, well, this would be secret. I remember being on the table for the abortion. There was a doctor and another nurse and with the doctor, but then by my side there was basically a nurse to coach me. I remember breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth with the pain, and the nurse saying, "You're doing well." I remember thinking, I got this from my mom. She said she learned to do that when she was in pain. And I was one of the first ones she delivered naturally. I was her fourth child. And she learned Lamaze. We call it Lamaze now. And I was doing that on the table. And I remember I wanted to ask, is it a boy or a girl? But I thought, this woman, nurse, doesn't know. She genuinely believed that she was doing what is good. And she coached me nice, she coached me well. But that's really meant for, that gift for that woman to speak that is for the gift of being a midwife. And instead it was for the death of the child that she's supposed to coach for others to be born. And I remember thinking, I don't want to hurt their feelings for me asking if it was a boy or a girl. I put their feelings in front of the truth of who God is and who he says we are. So see, I put mankind and pleasing mankind first. So the abortion happened with the suction soundings like you hear at the dentist with the suction sounds. It's awful, the vacuum sounds. And afterwards, it was about 10 to 20 minutes. But going on to the recovery room, I remember there was basically a row along the walls of women in beds in a slightly dark room where we were recovering. And in that recovery, I just remember we were all very quiet We were all very quiet. And I thought, we're all mourning. And I will be honest with you, I know others think that it wasn't a real baby. But as a believer, I knew it's worse. And you know, I knew. So I remember when we left that place, my boyfriend at that time took me to his apartment where he and his roommate were getting ready to move, which I had no idea. And he took me down this spiral staircase into the basement where there was a raw concrete basement, very dirty, and a mattress on the floor. I'd never seen that basement before, part of the apartment, and it was just a mattress on the edge of the wall, and then one light bulb that was on the ceiling without a regular covering fixture. But I remember laying on that mattress. I thought, I didn't care if it was dirty. I remember laying on there, and I actually thanked God for the mattress. I said, thank you, God. And I remember thinking, so this is what it's like to connect with the world and have the world come into you. This is what they get. The basement. A dirty basement. A dirty mattress. But yet I said, I know, Lord, this is what the world has to offer, but I thank you for this mattress. I remember walking in that first room, and I remember that my body, that had been changing, where my breasts were becoming more weight, which were to get ready to nurse my future child. I noticed when I walked in that room that the weight and my breasts were gone. It was gone. And I knew, I understood that it had stopped. The weight, the preparation to nurse my child. My body was automatically doing it. I knew it was gone. The preparation. I didn't tell my family. Because of that lie from the enemy that I'm tainted, that I'm only second best to a Christian man. Even if he thought he wanted to marry me, I thought, but he wouldn't get the best. And I wanted him, a Christian man, to get the best. And it wouldn't be me. So I would date Christian men, but not go any further. Instead, I wound up staying with, after that, I would break up with that man eventually and move on. But I started dating men that did not know Jesus, because I thought, well, they won't mind. They won't mind that I'm tainted and that I've had an abortion. And I wanted to give my love to someone and receive love. So I did, after that, I did date a man where we slept together, but he wasn't wanting to marry me after we were together for a while. And I said, well, I can't stay with you, because he didn't want to marry me. So I remember we broke up because of that. I said, it's marriage and not just boyfriend, girlfriend. But I will say a week later, he did kill himself. I was not in the Lord. I was not in the Lord. He did ask me the question on the last phone call. He said, are you pregnant? And I said, no. But that man had a friend. And so though his parents did not have a funeral, the friends started getting together. And through that connection, I met one of his friends that I had seen before. So in 1985, this man had killed himself. His name was Kirk. He had killed himself in that March. And I would get together with one of his friends. His name was Michael. And Michael and I, he was a non-believer as well. So he and I would get together, and I would sleep with him very quickly because I thought, well, I'm tainted. I'm used goods. This is what I'm good for. And I wanted to please him. Back to the desire for your husband, but yet it's meant for the husband. Meant for the husband anyway. But nonetheless. So I've got all these soul ties with other men in their lives. But nonetheless, when I'm with this man who would become my husband, Michael, I remember the first time we slept together, I prayed to the Lord. I said, Lord, I don't want to sin anymore. Don't. If this man is good enough, I'll go with him. If he's good enough, if he's okay, I'll marry him. I don't want to sin anymore. What I didn't know is trying not to sin and making ways to try not to sin was not the same thing as freedom from the law of sin and death, which is what I would come to truly understand later. But in that moment, I was trying to fix it. It was like fig leaves in the Garden of Eden. I'll cover it this way. I eventually fell in love with him. 3 weeks later, I thought, yes, this is the man. I'm going to marry him. And I was so in love, and he loved me, and we got engaged and then got pregnant before we got married. And I do recall saying to him and being ready that I'm not going to have an abortion. If he wants an abortion, that will be it. It's the child's life. More important. God had helped me. I didn't want to go through that again. And so I was pleasantly surprised that he said that he didn't want to do the abortion either. So we stayed together. So that would be my first child that I gave birth to, Elizabeth. I still remember the pregnancy of feeling in my womb, that first trimester, the feeling of like a butterfly inside of me, a completely independent being inside my womb. So butterflies are very special to me because I thought she feels like a butterfly, beating her wings like faster than I've seen any butterfly flap their wings, like a hummingbird maybe. But I will tell you that when she was born, her they had one of those mirrors where you could see the baby being born, the mother who's delivering. And the doctor said to take a look, and he moved out of the way for me to see the baby, my daughter Elizabeth. I didn't know if she was a boy or a girl yet, but just her head was out. Her eyes were opening and closing, like blinking, trying to just see before the rest of her body even was out. And then she was born, and we all celebrated. It's a girl, it's a girl. And she was placed on my chest. And I understood so much then. I have 3 children, living children. We would have a miscarriage between my second and third child. And when I was pregnant with our third child, I experienced something that was different in our marriage that I hadn't experienced before. And it was complete rejection from my husband that I was pregnant. I gave birth to my child. His name is Christopher. My second daughter, by the way, is Laura. Amazing children, all young adults now. I'm honored that God blessed me with them in so many ways, gifts given to the world in amazing ways. Later, my husband and I would make a decision, and that we couldn't afford a divorce, so we'll stay together, but we'd eventually make a joint decision, to have affairs. And so we both committed adultery against one another. And we were still married, but the divorce thing was there too. So, but eventually my husband would want to stay together, and we did. So this is for the future birthdays of the unborn. My desires for any mom that is carrying a child that you're considering abortion for the child. So this is to you, unborn children, whoever has an ear to hear, because even John the Baptist was baptized in his mother's womb at 6 months. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday from your future birthdays, unborn children. Happy birthday to you. And many more. For those mothers considering, what do I do? I'm pregnant. My husband or boyfriend's abusive, a single mom. God is provider. And there's a verse that goes to a melody that I want to sing to you and hope in looking to God, not to man who says you're going to fail. Because with God, you're going to live and provide for this child through him. And the verse is this. It's from Psalm, I think it's 119, 105. And it's this. Thy Lord is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. I'll say it again. Remember, it's true. Thy Lord is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path.